Good evening. Welcome to the Murder Mukbang Show. I'm Ashley.
And I'm Brittany.
And tonight we're going to be talking about Richard Speck. And his murders took place in Chicago, Illinois. Mm-hmm. So tonight we're having Chicago deep dish pizza.
Look, guys, we tried. We really did. Okay, so there's nowhere around us that sells Chicago-style pizza.
It's all New York style pizza, like
Sicilian,
like
it's.
And then you got the gourmet pizzas,
and then you have deep dish, which is what we have today. But that's not really what Chicago pizza is.
Ours is a DiGiorno.
It's a DiGiorno. I was going to attempt to make Chicago pizza, but you see, the store didn't have fast-acting yeast or pre-made pizza dough, and nobody has 7 hours to wait for dough to rise. I certainly do not. So, DiGiorno is what we're having tonight.
We got. We got DiGiorno. And I made a delicious chocolate cream pie to go with it.
So. We've had this pie in one of the videos before, guys, and it's delicious. Ashley needs to put the recipe up in the description.
We'll try to do that this time.
Okay.
All right. So are we ready to get started about Mr. Richard Speck?
Mm-hmm.
So many of you probably know who Richard Speck is. If you watched the show Mindhunter on Netflix. He was one of the case studies in that show, so that's kind of how I came to know who he was. I hadn't really known who he was before then. I'm pretty sure I had heard the name, but it wasn't until I watched the show Mindhunter that I found out who he was. So let's talk about his early life. Richard was born December 6, 1941, and as many of you know, December 7th, 1941 was the Pearl Harbor attack. Mm-hmm. And so Richard is found on recording saying that he was born the day all hell broke loose and it hasn't stopped since. Mm-hmm. So he kind of has an ominous outlook on life to begin with. But, I kind of feel like that was, I don't know, I kind of just feel like he was just wanting to be
like he took a tragedy that happened to our country and was like, I was born the day after,
or the day before,
so
but from what I understand, like his early childhood, ages 5 and 4 and 5, they were actually pretty decent. Mm-hmm. So we'll talk about his family. He's the son of Mary Margaret and Benjamin. Mary Margaret was a very religious person, and she had very strict rules, especially against alcohol and smoking. Mm-hmm. And it actually got to the point where she was so strict about these rules that she reprimanded her husband. Because he went and had a beer at a fish fry, she was like, oh, hell no. And, I don't know what she actually did.
I heard somewhere that she reprimanded him at the party.
At the actual party. So in front of all of his friends.
In front of everybody.
So, something very emasculating. Mm-hmm. She didn't, put him down for it. So, but Richard and his father, Benjamin, had a pretty good relationship. Some of Benjamin's earliest childhood memories were of him and his father going fishing for bluegills. Mm-hmm. That was something that they did special themselves. Yeah. So that was very, that when his father died, that was a very emotional time for him, because now one of his best friends is gone, and his father did die at a very early age, in 1947. Richard at the time was only 6 years old, and he was completely devastated by this. He so much so that when he went back to school, his classmates were noticing a behavioral change in him.
It completely changed him when his dad died.
He started exhibiting, he's in the 2nd grade, and he started exhibiting toddler-like behavior, mm-hmm. Such as eating crayons or, throwing temper tantrums, almost to the point where students would be having story time, and Richard would be sitting on the teacher's lap because the teacher didn't know what else to do to calm him down. Mm-hmm. So he had a really difficult time with that. 3 years after Benjamin died, Mary Margaret actually remarried to a guy, get this guys, listen to his name, Carl August Rudolph Lindbergh. Sounds like a dick.
Mm-hmm.
Who's got 4 names?
The guy from that Jack the Ripper video we did.
Oh, yeah, that's right. The Montague guy or something. No, Prince Albert.
Yeah, Prince
It was
Albert.
Prince Albert.
Don't trust anybody before. Oh, wait. We discovered that if they have 4 names, though, it cancels it out.
Is that what we determined?
Yeah, we
I don't
did.
remember. So this Carl guy, he's a traveling insurance salesman. And he's a real dick. He's an alcoholic and abusive to the children, mentally, psychologically abusive to them. What I find funny is that Mary Margaret, she's this strict Christian and is very anti, alcohol, anti-smoking, and she marries a fucking alcoholic.
Literally,
good choice.
Fought her first husband at a party because he drank a beer, but then she's going to marry an alcoholic.
Yeah. Okay. You chose poorly.
Yeah.
So once Mary Margaret and Carl, if that's from The Walking Dead, if you watch that, they moved to Santo, Texas in 1950, but that wasn't the only time that Carl moved the family. Apparently they moved to 10 different places over a period of 12 years, which unless you're a military kid, that's a lot of moving, I guess because he's a traveling salesman, he's got to travel all around. So, they ended up, pretty much all over the place. Like I said before, the stepfather, Carl, was extremely abusive to Richard, just constantly put him down, basically said he was never going to amount to anything, just was a real dick about everything. Yeah. So, of course, Richard is still basically grieving over his father dying.
Yep.
His mom remarries this asshole. This asshole is being psychologically abusive to Richard. So what does Richard, what does he do? He turns to alcohol. And he's actually, at the age of 12, he was stealing alcohol from his stepdad's cabinet, and he was reported to be drunk at school on numerous occasions. So you got to know that this kid is not doing well, and I'm not taking up for this guy because he's a real piece of work. Yeah. But when you're beat down constantly, what do you do? So at the age of 13, Richard was arrested for the first time for trespassing. That was going to be the beginning of his whole long life.
His huge rap sheet, guys.
Yeah, it's pretty long. And I'll go over that here in a minute. In October of 1961, Richard met 15-year-old Shirley Malone. They met at a fair. And 3 weeks later, she was pregnant. And so there you go. They must have been humping like rabbits during that time.
Yeah.
So you would think that Richard would be the guy to be like, oh, I've got a child on the way. I'm going to do better with my life so I can set a good example for my son or daughter. No. He works for a 7-Up company, which... he made enough money that would have been enough to support his family and to take care of them. And he decided that he was going to spend his entire paycheck on prostitutes and booze. Yep. So there you go. Good choice. Good choices. This guy's got an awesome outlook.
Good choices, Dick.
So... in 1962, in 1962, Richard was arrested for, I'm assuming it was probably a drunken disorderly from just the description of it. It sounded like he was drunk and being an ass. And so he got arrested and had to spend 22 days in jail. Well, on July 5th, 1962, his wife, Shirley, gives birth to their child, who, her name is Robbie Lynn. But get this. His wife, Shirley, didn't even know he was in fucking jail.
No.
How do you not know that?
The only thing I could think of is that people didn't have cell phones back then. And that it was not that unusual to not hear from somebody for a little while.
And maybe if he's out drinking and with a prostitute, it's kind of the normal thing and that's what you expected. But still, So she basically has a baby by herself. So after his daughter was born, you would think that, again, he would be like, hey, I finally have a kid here. I want to get my life on track. No, didn't happen. He chose poorly again. Yep. And he continued on with his criminal record. And it was numerous counts of forgery, robbery, burglary, aggravated assault. Basically, you name it. And this guy, with the exception of like murder, he had been arrested for it. And so one of the times that he had gotten, when he was arrested, when he was let out on parole, a week later, he is arrested again for attacking a woman with a carving knife. Mm-hmm. And so at that time, he was sentenced and he was supposed to spend 16 months in jail, but due to an error, he got out after 6 months. So in January of 1966, Shirley files for divorce against Richard. And so then Richard, I guess in return, because he was upset about it, like, I think it was kind of like him and Shirley had an okay agreement as far as the divorce goes, but inside he was not doing well with that at all. No. Like he moved back in with his sister. And basically was lazy. He had applied to get a couple of jobs, but they all fell through or he didn't show up for them. Like he just was going off of the deep end. So in January of 1966, actually, probably shortly after his wife filed for divorce, Richard stabs a man. Okay. His defense attorney was able to plead it down to disturbing the peace. Yep. Stabs a man with a knife. But he's disturbing the peace. Yep. That's great. Good job.
Good job.
So you know what his sentence was? He had to pay a $10 fine and spend 3 days in jail. Our justice system is amazing. Even back in 1966.
Even in 1966.
So in March of 1966, Richard robbed a grocery store. He really cracks me up, just like with this whole robbery and everything. Like,
does this not like remind you of Trailer Park Boys a little bit?
It does,
just this
a little
part.
Bit. This whole little part. It's Ricky. It's Ricky, 100% trying to make a profit.
Yep.
So he robs a grocery store and he steals 70 cartons of cigarettes. He then sells them out of the trunk of his car, and then once he's sold all the cigarettes, he abandons the car. It's just like, bye.
Yeah.
And then it's like anymore. And then it's like 3 days later, on March 8th, he gets arrested for robbing the store. Good choices, Robert.
Yeah.
I mean, Richard.
Richard. Yeah. Dirty dick.
Dirty dick.
And that was how many arrests for him?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. So when he got arrested for selling those cigarettes outside of his car, that was his 42nd arrest, which is crazy.
Which makes me wonder if the night that I'm about to talk about could have been avoided if, like, he would have done any fucking jail time for stabbing somebody.
You know, and not getting off with disturbing the peace.
Like, all right. Anyway, so on July 13th, 1966 at 11 p.m., Richard decides that he's going to go attempt to rob this house that's full of a bunch of nurses. The house number is 2319 East 100th Street, and that's in Southside Chicago. I don't know if anybody out there watches the show Shameless. We're talking about a lot of shows on here, but Ashley and I watch the same shows, so we know what we're talking about when we bring something up. But where this took place is where in the same neighborhood as the family in Shameless.
Okay.
So, and that this house still stands. It is owned by somebody. I think they're renting it out. I've watched a couple of videos on YouTube where somebody has went and tried to do like a tour of the house, but there's people living there. So the house was never torn down. Anyway, so on this night in July in 1966, at 11 o'clock, he broke into the house and using only a knife, took captive 8 nurses. Their names are, and I'm going to read them off because I don't want to get any of them wrong, which I might anyway, because I
There's some crazy names in
Yeah. So Gloria Davy, Patricia Matsuk, Nina Jo Schmel, Pamela Wilkening, Suzanne Ferris, Mary Ann Jordan, Morlita Gargello, and Valentina Payson. So that's eight girls and they weren't all there at the same time. The video I watched when he first went to the house, there was only about 5 of them there, and he took them all into one room, bound them, tied their hands up, tied their feet. They were still able to talk, so he hadn't gagged them yet. And then while he had those 5 in, more girls kept coming in. So as they were coming in, he was grabbing them from the front of the house, taking them to the room where they were all tied up and binding them pretty much.
Oh.
So all of the girls were nurses. So when you go through nursing school, sometimes you do have to go through psychological training. So the girls were trying to talk him down, to use reverse psychology on him to see if they could try to get out of the situation they were in. And I read that that's why they didn't put up a fight. Even though there was 8 of them all together, they could have easily overpowered him, but they were trying to do it the non-violent way.
Right. Pamela Wilkening, she actually was antagonizing Richard.
Okay.
And she said, I'm going to pick you out of the lineup. Yeah. And he just went full force on her and killed her.
So I know that he took each of them one at a time after he had them all together in the room. He then proceeded to take one out of the room one at a time into the hallway and either stab them to death or strangle them. He did rape one of the girls, but I cannot remember which one it was.
It was Gloria Davy.
Okay, so
he was the last one.
She was the last one. Apparently, she flirted with him a little bit, is what he said in some of the interviews. Yep. So he took her to the living room, bound her, tied her up on the couch. He raped her and then also sodomized her before killing her. Now, after he's killed everybody, Mr. Richard, I don't know if he just lost count of how many girls were in the house or if he thought that he'd killed this girl and just completely forgot about, checking her to see if she was still alive. But Mrs. Corazon Amuro, Amuro, sorry. She hid underneath the bed while he murdered the rest of the girls. And that's a very scary thing to be tied up and listening to multiple girls being murdered ahead of you and knowing that that's about to happen to you.
Yeah.
I feel like that would just be the scariest thing to know that you're getting ready to die in a really brutal way. So she hid under the bed until 6 a.m. before she thought it was safe enough to come out. And when she finally did, she seen the fucking massacre that was all of her roommates and called the police. Richard later stated that he was drunk and high on drugs the entire night and did not remember anything about the murders and that his initial reasoning to go to that house was to rob them. His fingerprints were found all over the house. No surprise, because he was the one that murdered them.
Obviously.
So his fingerprints were everywhere, you guys. 2 days after the murder, I guess he decided that he was, not feeling any kind of remorse or sadness or anything. So he decides to just go back on his alcohol bender. And he was actually identified by a drifter, Claude Lunsford, who he had been drinking with, along with somebody else. The name wasn't mentioned. But on July 16th, Lunsford recognized him from a sketch from a newspaper about the murder and called the police. Now, the police didn't fucking do anything at this point. They were just like, all right, well, we're gonna take this call. Thanks for the tip. And that's where it ended. Nobody ever listened to Lunsford. I don't know if maybe because he was a drifter, as a homeless person, and
so his story wasn't credible.
Yeah. So
that's the right way to treat people.
Yeah. So pretty much they didn't do anything at that point. Let's see. Richard then attempted suicide and was taken to the hospital a few days after he committed this murder and went on another drinking bender. And the doctor, Dr. Leroy Smith, recognized his born to raise hell tattoo and called the police. Now that tattoo was it was in the newspapers because the girl that survived recognized it, and that was one of the identifying features about him that people were looking for. So the doctor at the emergency room recognized it, called the police. Close to the time of this arrest, because he was arrested after that, they were able to track him down. The Supreme Court passed the Miranda law, which, if you guys don't know what the Miranda law is, pretty much that whatever is said from the time that somebody is arrested, that cannot be used in their trial unless they were first read their rights and know that they had the right to a lawyer.
Yeah, so anything that is like, as soon as a cop arrests somebody, they state their Miranda rights. They say you're being placed under arrest for whatever, and then they go into the Miranda rights, and that way everybody is treated fairly, and they won't use anything outside of that against them in court.
Mm-hmm. So we're going to move on to the trial. When they first went to trial, Richard's lawyer tried really hard to be like, hey, he's not all there in the head.
Which we're not exactly sure about because, he had, a traumatizing childhood. He didn't do the greatest in school, but was it because he was just a bad egg and he didn't want to do well in school? Or is it because he did have some kind of mental disability.
And learning disability? Right. So it was actually eventually ruled that he was competent and that he could go ahead and go to trial. While waiting for trial, he did go to counseling a few times a week with the psychiatrist, Marvin Zaporin. Zaporin said he released a statement and said that Richard was struggling with depression, anxiety, guilt, obsessive compulsive behaviors. He had an extreme love for his family, and he also suffered from the Madonna whore complex, which, if you guys don't know what that is, it's if you are in a committed relationship with somebody, you can no longer become sexually aroused.
Seems kind of odd.
Yeah.
Like it's a syndrome. It's that's just weird to me.
If you're in people that have this, if they look at women, and Richard did, it's in his interviews that he looked at women very saintly and that he looked up to them, but as soon as he thought that something
was amiss,
amiss, or they did something that he didn't agree with, they were immediately thought as prostitutes and trash. And so let's see, Zaporin, he was later found that he was actually doing all of this to make money off of Richard.
He was trying to sell a book.
He was trying to sell a book, pretty much. He didn't testify at the trial for the defense or the prosecution because of this, because they figured out that he was just trying to get money. He somehow obtained Richard's permission later to tell the book that he wrote, What I Am Really Like, and that was published in 1967.
Yeah, I think he kind of coerced Richard into signing away.
Yeah.
All of that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So now I'm going to kind of talk about his confession and the trial as far as, finally getting convicted. So when Richard committed suicide and he was taken to the hospital, the doctor that was overseeing him said that Richard had actually confessed the murders to him. Mm-hmm. Well, that doctor, Dr. Smith, he actually did not testify because Robert. I keep saying Robert. What is wrong with me? Richard was under heavy sedation, and so you're not lucid when you're under sedation, obviously, so you can't be held accountable for what you're saying.
Even though he was telling the truth.
Yeah.
Can't use it.
Too bad. So then once Richard was no longer sedated, was no longer drugged up from, his drug use, he was like, I don't remember the murders. No. I was taking drugs that night. I was drunk, and he just basically says that he blacked out during that whole time. So they go to trial, and in Richard's trial, the woman who he had left behind, Corazon, now I can't pronounce it, Amaro, something. I'm sorry, I don't mean to mispronounce it. I just am terrible at name pronunciations. She gets up on the witness stand, and she is asked to identify the man who committed the murders and if he was in the courtroom. And she got up out of the witness stand, walked directly over to him, pointed a finger at him, and said, "This is the man."
Yep.
And it took the jury 45 minutes to deliberate, and they came back with the guilty verdict. And Richard was sentenced to death. So, there you have it. But his conviction, his death sentence, shouldn't say conviction, was actually reversed, because during that time, it was voted on that the death penalty is considered to be unconstitutional, so they were doing away with it. So they revised his sentence, and he was sentenced to between 400 and 1,200 years.
Yep.
Why not just say life in prison?
Yeah.
Silly. Even if this man was going to live to be 1,200 years old, why not, just let him out at that point, you know?
If you're
1,200 years old.
over a century old, you might as well just be released. Kudos to you for living that long.
Right?
So, Richard got his sentence.
That's just, okay.
Pretty much life
he should be in prison.
Yep. Because you can't live 1,200 years, guys. You wanted to be up some pie.
Yeah. You want some pie? I want some pie.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So he received the nickname of Birdman while he was in prison, because he had found a couple of sparrows that had gotten injured inside of his cell, and he kept them as fucking pets. He had been caught several times with drugs and moonshine, and he was recorded saying several times he didn't care if he got in trouble. At one point, he said, "How am I going to get in trouble? I'm here for 1,200 years." So even he's that's the dumbest.
He finally turned positive.
There you go. Yep.
It can't get any worse.
No. So, because Richard hated the press so much, he never did any kind of interviews, you guys, at all. And a lot of the times when there are murderers or serial killers or whatever, what have you, on death row or life in prison, they do get a lot of visitors, and they get a lot of mail, because people like us, weirdos out here, curious about them.
I would not do that.
Actually, I have thought about writing
people on death row.
Yeah, just to see where their minds are at, just to see what they're thinking on a daily basis. Okay. Anyway,
you'll wait till he gets pardoned, and then what happens?
Then I'm changing my name and location. So he only granted one interview in 1978, where he publicly confessed to the murders in the interview. He had hoped to get out of prison between 1978 and the year 2000 because he wanted to open up a grocery store.
Probably to sell cigarettes.
Probably to sell cigarettes. Oh my God. So during this interview, he stated that he had no feelings at all the time of the murder. I'm going to read what he said in the interview. "I had no feelings at all that night. They said there was blood all over the place. I can't remember. It felt like nothing. I'm sorry as hell for those girls and for their families and for me. If I had to do it over again, it would be simply a house burglary." Speck's final thought for the American people was, "Just tell them to keep up their hatred for me. I know it keeps up their morale, and I don't know what I would do without it."
Okay.
So
now he's turned negative again.
Well, I feel like a lot of those people, they do this kind of shit for attention. They do interviews like that because they're getting some kind of attention, whether it be negative or positive.
Yeah, take a look at Ted Bundy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Or how about all the killers that get married while they're in jail?
Yeah.
They do it for attention. They grant these interviews and they allow visitors because it's fucking boring in prison, I'm sure.
Especially on death row.
You
know what the end game is.
Yep, exactly. So he did it, and there was an FBI agent, John Douglas, and he wrote a book called Mindhunter, which we've talked about this show before, and we talked about earlier in this episode. That is a great show. So if you guys have not watched that, it's on Netflix. It's great. Watch it. Anyway, so he wrote a book, and in an insert in the book says he found an injured sparrow that had flown in through one of the broken windows and nursed it back to health. When it was healthy enough to stand, he tied a string around its leg and had it perch on his shoulder. At one point, a guard told him pets weren't allowed. I can't have it, Speck challenged, then walked over to a spinning fan, threw the small bird in. Horrified, the guard said, I thought you liked that bird. I did, Speck replied, but if I can't have it, no one can. Psycho!
Whoa.
Fucking psycho.
That's like super overreacted right there. Like, calm it down, bro. So, excuse me. So later in life, in 1996, a video was released to the Illinois state legislator. And on that video, sorry, that's my phone. I didn't turn the volume down. Anyways, where was I?
The video that came out in the 80s.
Right. So, and then, yeah. So it was, I guess it was recorded in the 80s. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't released to the state legislator until 1996. And in that video, it is, you see a bunch of inmates and they're like, oh, just doing all kinds of drugs and having oral sex. And right in the center of it, who do you see? You see good old boy Richard Speck in there.
Yep.
Performing some oral sex on another inmate.
With a big old pair of titties.
Okay, so that apparently it's speculated that he smuggled drugs, hormone drugs in, and he started to develop women's breasts. It was quite disturbing to see. I didn't watch the video where they were doing the oral sex, thank God, but the one where he's talking with that other inmate and he just takes his shirt off and he's like, oh, there they are. Like, it was disturbing to me. I'm sorry. This was weird.
He was also wearing ladies' underwear, silk ladies' underwear.
He was parading around in those underpants. And he kept saying he's heard saying if they knew how much fun I was having, they would let me loose.
Yep.
So that's gross. And then somebody behind the camera says to him, how did he feel about killing the nurses? And he said that he had no feeling and he was not sorry and it just wasn't their night. He was also said that strangling someone isn't like what you see on TV. It takes over 3 minutes and you have to have a lot of strength.
Yeah.
So that's kind of disturbing in itself. I apologize about this. Because he does remember. Yeah. And he is saying on video that he killed the girls. He's asked, did you kill those nurses? And he said, well, sure I did. But it was also almost like when the way that he said it was like, well, like that's what they're telling me that I did. Like I don't know how you read that, but
I think he said a lot and did a lot of shit in prison to survive. I don't think even though I did watch the video, of course. Ashley didn't watch the video. I watched the video. Look guys, anytime we've said that we've watched something and Ashley has not watched it, chances are that I have either watched or listened to it. So anyway, in this video, like he's literally doing lines off genitalia. Let me just say that. I'm not gonna be detailed about it, but he was snorting cocaine off of another inmate's genitalia. And we're asking him questions like, do you like effing guys? Like, I'm just gonna say it what they said. They asked, do you like fucking guys? And he said yes. And he said, have you always liked fucking guys? And he said yes. And I don't think that's the case, though. I think that all of this happened in prison because he was an older inmate that was charged with raping and murdering 8 women. Now, in prison, like, those kind of people don't last very long. Like, if you've hurt a child or a woman, you don't survive very easily. Like, and I think he did what he had to do, or what he thought he had to do in order to survive, and which was growing fucking titties and sleeping with all the inmates that wanted it, and doing a bunch of drugs and talking about the murder. So maybe like what you were picking up on was kind of just like him nonchalantly talking about it, kind of bragging about it. So even if he had felt bad about it, he was never going to fucking admit that in that room.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. That's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
So, Richard died of a heart attack on December 5th, 1991. The day before his... What birthday? I can't even do math in my head.
I don't know.
I'm sorry.
I don't have that page.
Oh, you don't have that page. No. Sorry. He was born in 1941, so he would have been 50 years old. Oh, and I had it written down right before his 50th birthday. Whoa. So his sister, so he was cremated, and his sister took his ashes and spread them on basically an undisclosed location. I guess, she didn't want people to kind of desecrate that area.
So you read somewhere that she took his ashes? Because one of the things that I watched, I think it was a video, was that none of his family wanted him, and he ended up being buried in a potter's field.
I mean, that's the article on Wikipedia. So, but I mean, you can't always believe everything. I guess I should have cited that better, but we don't know.
Either way,
he's dead.
He's dead.
Had a great life in prison.
He did. Sounds like he had a good old grand time.
Yeah. And what do you think about that chocolate cream pie?
This fucking pie is so good. It's so good. It's delicious.
So I'll try to post a link if anybody wants to try it. Hopefully I'll get to that this week. So anyways, anything else to add?
No, I think that's it for this case this week, guys.
That's our story about Richard Speck. Sorry, we were a little unorganized. I was a little unorganized. I'm sorry. It happens. Whatever. Have a great week. We'll see you next time.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you for watching the Murder Mukbang Show. You kill them.
We grill them.
Bye.
Bye, guys.